The constitutionality of the Electoral Amendment Act will be heard at the Constitutional Court on Tuesday. The Concourt will hear applications brought by the Independent Candidates Association as well as One South Africa movement on an urgent basis. The Electoral Act was amended to allow for independent candidates to contest national and provincial elections. When the new bill was presented for comment during the legislative process, it was met with considerable criticism. We speak now to Mmusi Maimane, leader of Build One South Africa, about some of their concerns. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with that. A chief concern for Build One South Africa.
Good afternoon. And first of all, it's precisely why Build One South Africa exists, because in many ways we recognize that the government would not listen to the Constitutional Court when the Concourt said, make it possible that citizens can directly vote for their people, hold those people accountable, and bring power back to the people. And so naturally, what has now happened is that a bill that was passed, signed into law by the President, makes it broadly impossible for citizens who want that vision to come to pass, to be realized. The first concern is most obviously the issue of signatures, which is that passed in the bill that says that a new contesting party needs to get over 9,000 signatures, or that it's proportional to what happens in provinces. That in many instances, the tallying up of the votes is still favorable. In other words, it discriminates against those who are standing independently and directly. And I just think it's a principle that says that when the bill was signed into law, the President was had given instruction to say that within 4 months, a new panel would be established to look at the broader issues of electoral reform. That still has not been done. So the bona fides of the election and how we are treating this election is an indicator of a government that doesn't want to be held accountable and is maliciously compliant with the Constitution.
You also note, or rather Mr. Jonas Mutibe in the founding affidavit of Build One South Africa notes that the amendment of the signature requirement that Build One South Africa seeks could have very profound implications for the Commission's preparations for the 2024 elections, and adding rather that should the Act be amended to only require 1,000 signatures to register for the election, the number of participants in the election may increase substantially. Why is this a concern?
No, of course they will use such an argument going forward. I've been threatened enough time with putting the election in jeopardy. And this is not a new issue. Don't forget the fact that electoral reform has been an issue that President Mandela raised, President Mbeki commissioned the Van Zyl report on. President Motlanthe raised it in his high-level panel report, well tasked by President Zuma. You will now recall the fact that even now, President Ramaphosa has had to sign into law that's been driven by the Constitutional Court. So at which point do you just keep going for the sake of it? Because we will always have elections, and furthermore, we will always find ourselves in a space where we constantly keep going, well, there's an election coming, that's better. Once this one is done, we head straight to 2026 elections, with a parliament that's been largely dysfunctional. I think if you want to blame anyone for such an issue, let's look at the function of parliament. They didn't consult on time, didn't do their job. Now they've put the country in serious challenge. If they'd amended that it becomes a constituency-based system, then you would limit the amount of participants that are there because they'd only participate in their respective constituency. Now instead, you've thrown it up to chance, said constituencies are provinces, and naturally now you are saying, how do you find other mechanisms that are unconstitutional to limit participation? I think it's a failure of Parliament, and Parliament must be called out for its weaknesses in this regard. But in solving for the issue, I do believe that that committee that was meant to be established needs to deliberate on this issue, give a definitive timeline as to how these matters can be resolved so that we can get on with a free and fair election and ultimately achieve the best form of accountability rather than what we have.
I do beg your pardon. Your prospects for success as this heads to the courts, how are you feeling?
Yeah, look, we feel the teams that are working on this particular case, I think, are confident to achieve the right outcomes. And furthermore, we are going into an election to maximize that, because I think for many citizens, they realize that it's time now that they get their democracy back and power back to the people. And let's put a government that will focus on the future of this country.
Much for your time this afternoon. Mmusi Maimane leads Build One South Africa.